Artists along the Golden Road experience the Northwest through its art and the artists who live here. Northwest artists are passionate about art, and Golden Road Arts extends their passion through education. We're on an arts mission, introducing children to art. The Golden Road Arts nonprofit and Northwest artists help us provide our instruction free for children, encouraging and supporting the arts and arts education now and for the future.
Hi everybody, welcome to Golden Road Arts. My name is Barbara Mason, and today we're going to talk about a really famous artist, a man named Henri Toulouse-Lautrec. Now, Mr. Lautrec was born in Albi, France in 1864. So 1864 to 1964, that was 100 years. And now we're at 2021. So that is really a long time, 150 years. So he was born really a long time ago. And when he was born, his family lived in the south of France, and they were very wealthy. And his dad was did a lot of hunting, and he had racehorses, and he anticipated that his son would follow in his footsteps and manage the properties. But what happened was when Toulouse-Lautrec was 13, he got up out of a chair and he broke one of his legs, right at the femur, right at the top of his, between his hip and his knee. And so, of course, that meant he was laid up for quite a while, and really quite a long time it took him to recover. And then a year later, the same thing happened with his other leg. And so this happened because he had a problem in his family. It was a genetic problem, and it caused his legs to not grow. And so when he was an adult, the top of his body grew like a normal person, but his legs were very short. So he was only 4'6". Now 4'6" isn't very tall for a man, it's pretty short. And but he had a wonderful personality. He had a great wit, and he was very funny, very, very funny. He was very friendly, and everybody liked him. And on top of that, he could draw really well. And one of the things he did was he drew caricatures. Now, a caricature is when you take your pencil and instead of drawing a person the way they really look, you emphasize something. And so he would make people's noses pointed, and he would make their ears pointed, and he would make their chins stick out, and it would look like them, but it wouldn't really be like a portrait. And people thought these were very funny, and they liked them. And so he just made so many friends. And he wanted to draw. When he was laid up all this time, he spent many, many hours drawing. And fortunately, we have a lot of sketchbooks of his from when he was young. And we can tell that even when he was, 15 or 16 years old, that he was really going to be a great artist. And he wanted to go to Paris to learn to draw. That was where everybody went. Paris wasn't only a city for artists. It was a city, pretty much the city that was the center of France, maybe the center of Europe at that time. And an amazing thing happened. They got electric lights. Now, electric lights were brand new. So you can understand that if you had been going around with a candle, walking in the dark, all of a sudden, the whole city was bright. And Toulouse-Lautrec lived in a part of Paris called Montmartre. It was a working class part of Paris. And one of the things that Montmartre had was a lot of old grain elevators that they had used for commercial work. And these turned into nightclubs. And so they were lit up with electric lights everywhere. And the whole part of Montmartre was just amazingly lit up. And there was a nightclub there that was very famous called the Moulin Rouge. And Lautrec did a lot of posters for the Moulin Rouge. And I don't know if the Moulin Rouge made Toulouse-Lautrec famous or if he made the Moulin Rouge famous. But people still go there today to see it. It's a great tourist attraction. Everybody wants to see the Moulin Rouge if they go to Paris. So we're going to do a couple of posters that Lautrec did. He became very, very famous for doing these posters. And one of the things we're going to talk about today is, in our previous discussion, we talked about different kinds of binders that we use for art materials. And one of the things that I did today, I did this sample, and the color in the background and the color on the coat is a water-soluble pencil. That means when I put water on it, it's going to start bleeding. But this purple line around the edge is an oil pastel. So an oil pastel is the pigment, and instead of being gum arabic like watercolor or wax like crayons, it's actually oil. And so it's very, when you feel it with your finger, it's very, it's, for one thing, it feels raised up, and it's very, very waxy, but also kind of when you rub your hand over it, you could kind of almost smoosh it a little bit. Let's see if I can make it smoosh a little bit. Yeah, you see how it smooshes a little bit, and that's because it's very soft. So we're going to take our watercolor, and we're going to see what happens when we try it on our, and what's going to happen now when we get this wet, the water is going to hit the oil, and it's going to stop. So we're going to be able to put water here on the watercolor crayon, but it's not going to, normally if you put two colors right next to each other with watercolor, one would bleed into the other. But that's not going to happen here. The blue isn't going to bleed into the background because it's going to stop when it hits the oil. So it's going to go right up to that oil, and it's going to stop. It's not going to spread over. So we're going to put these drawings on our internet page for you, so you'll be able to print them off and color them any color you want. This was a very famous poster that Toulouse-Lautrec did. It was for a man who was a performer, and his name was, you can see his name on the bottom here, it's Astrid Brandt. And these posters were not small posters, these were huge posters. These posters were 4 feet wide. They were 4 feet wide, and they were 6 feet tall. So you can imagine a poster that big. So I think I can just kind of pull the blue over here. You can imagine a poster that big, how impressive it looked. And they put these up all over the city. And so not only did the poster advertise the performance of this performer, Mr. Brandt, but it also made Toulouse-Lautrec really famous, because you can see right here in the bottom, he has a little thing that was his name, and he did a T with an L and a C kind of in a circle, and it became known as his signature. So you can see now the same thing is happening when it hits the oil pastel. It doesn't blend in with the blue. So these, this is a water-soluble crayon. It's called Derwent, but there are lots of companies that make it. And I think I got these probably at Dick Blick. We buy a lot of things at Dick Blick. Okay, so I'm going to set this aside now. And then the other thing I did was I did one here that is just crayons, so you can see the difference. Now the actual poster that Toulouse-Lautrec did, the coat and the hat were black, and then the scarf was bright red. And this is an unusual way to make a poster, because at this time the people in Europe, they drew things that looked real. So if you drew a tree or a lake or a house, it had dimension and it looked real. You know, things were in the background, things were in the middle ground, and then things that were real close to you were in the foreground. But about this time, a lot of prints from Japan started to be imported into Europe, and it was a very different kind of drawing. Things were outlined in black, and the images were very flat. And you can see that that's what these images look like. They're very flat. They're just all one color. And it was a way different way of looking at things. And Toulouse-Lautrec really liked this. He really liked these drawings that came from Japan, and he started to copy these real flat images. And he sort of revolutionized things doing that. And one of the things that happened was when we had this printmaking, I've got a picture here that we're going to put on the internet, but this picture is of a printmaking shop in 1900 in Paris. And you can see that this person is standing here, is only this big, and this printing press is just huge. So you can see how big these posters were. The posters were 6 feet tall and 4 feet wide. They were just enormous. And it was unheard of for them to make anything that big that they could print. So not only was the work revolutionary in the way that it looked, where it had flat images, but to do something this large, it was like the beginning of contemporary printmaking. And so I'm sure that they started printing books with this same method eventually. So we're going to put this picture on the internet so you can look at it. It's really amazing to see this gigantic machine. So one of the people that Toulouse-Lautrec was friends with was a woman named Jane Averill. Jane Averill was a performer in one of the nightclubs, and she was a friend of Toulouse-Lautrec. And so she commissioned this poster of herself for Toulouse-Lautrec to draw. And again, he did very flat colors, and her dress was dark, and then this wonderful snake. I can't imagine having a dress with a snake like that on it, but it was very, very pretty poster. And so I've done the poster here in crayon, and then I've done it with markers. Now you can see there's not very many choices of colors with markers, and so even though this looks pretty good, it looks maybe a little better in crayon. And then I have it here on a little heavier piece of paper, and I thought maybe we'd just do this one with a little watercolor to see how it looks. And maybe we should outline it with our oil pastel. Now this is the black oil pastel. Let's just try this and see how it works, if it's going to make it easier to keep the color where I want it to go just by making the lines in the oil pastel. So the fact that you can make it resist, that's what we're doing. We're going to be resisting it with the watercolor. You could do a lot of fun drawings with oil pastel by making it resist. Having one color hit the oil pastel and stop. So we'll just outline this a little bit and then we'll color it. So Jane Averill had bright red hair, and Toulouse-Lautrec did quite a few drawings of the Moulin Rouge, and she was in quite a few of them with her bright red hair. Sometimes you could only see her from the back. That's probably enough. Okay, so let's do her bright red hair here. Now remember when we're painting with watercolor, we're only going to use the point of the brush, and we're just going to, no, we're not going to scrub it. We're just going to very carefully. So now if we want to do her skin, I guess we have to make it a little lighter for her skin. She probably wouldn't look good with bright red skin. We'll kind of get her skin orange. Okay, so we got her hand and her. So now what color should we make her dress? Did I do that line? I think I missed a line there. Okay. Maybe we should make her dress green. Put a little yellow in give it a little life. So Jane Avril was an amazing dancer and singer, and she was very, very popular. So you can see now I'm doing this watercolor, and it's just stopping. It's stopping when it hits the, it's stopping where it hits the, it's stopping where it hits the oil pastel. So even if I tried to go over it, it wouldn't go further. It would just stop there. And that's because it resists. Running out of water here. Need more green, a little more yellow. So what do you think it would have been like to be a dancer in the Moulin Rouge? To go every night and have electric lights, which are pretty amazing at the time, and to dance on a stage for lots of people. Do you think it would have been a lot of fun? I think it might have been fun. Okay, so what color are we going to make the snake? Let's make the snake yellow. Now we have the same situation when we do the snake. The snake is not going to, the yellow isn't going to bleed out because it's going to stop right against the oil pastel. So if we did this and we didn't have this oil pastel line, it would be pretty hard to keep those colors separate. Now, Jane Avril has a kind of a headdress on. I guess we can make that green too. So I might be able to not get it to bleed. I don't have another color next to it. But if I did, it would be harder to do this. So because I don't have another color next to it, I'm not going to do the background. But you could see that if I let it dry a little bit, I could come back and then I could do the background and it wouldn't bleed. Well, it wouldn't bleed here because I have the oil pastel, but up here around her head it probably would. So there we are with our oil color. We've done our watercolor with our oil pastel, our markers, our crayons, and this again is crayon, and then this was our oil pastel and watercolor. So I want you to be thinking about not only about Toulouse-Lautrec and about his life. He had a very short life. He died when he was only 36. So 36 is pretty young. 36 is probably maybe the age of your mom and dad. It's very, very young to die. But he, because he had these health issues all his life, he just wasn't very strong, and his health deteriorated. And finally, he moved out of Montmartre and moved to a much nicer part of Paris, where he just eventually succumbed to his health issues, and he died. But he started a movement, contemporary movement with these posters, just the beginning of printmaking, really. And he's a very, very famous artist. So there were other artists that came along, and they drew things like him, but they didn't become as famous. And I'm not sure why. Their work was similar, but for some reason they just didn't become famous. Now, it might be the fact that Lautrec was so prolific. He did so many drawings in his life. He did, I have it written down here, he did 275 watercolors, 325 posters, and he did 5,000 drawings. Now, can you imagine that? So he didn't live very long, and he did all of that work. So one of the important things about being an artist is to spend a lot of time drawing. If you want to be an artist, you have to put a lot of time in working at it. It's just like anything else, the more you do, the better you get. So if you go to Paris and you go to see the Moulin Rouge, you'll be able to know it still exists because Toulouse-Lautrec made it so famous. I want to show you this book. This book is about Toulouse-Lautrec, and it's called Moulin Rouge and the City of Light. Now, this book was written by a man named Robert Brulé, and it was written, probably written for young people. And so this would be a really good book for your teacher to have and for you to look at if you were interested in learning more about Toulouse-Lautrec. One of the things this book shows is it shows a picture of the city when they first started having lights. These pictures are done by two famous artists. One is done by Auguste Renoir, and the other one is done by Camille Pissarro. These are both very, very famous oil painters around the same time of Toulouse-Lautrec. And you can see when you see these how beautiful the city looks, how exciting it was to be in Paris in the 1890s. But this is a very interesting book. It talks about Toulouse-Lautrec's life, and it shows a picture of him when he was a grown person. You can see how short he was. Anyway, it's just a very interesting book. It has a lot of the posters in it, and this would be a really good book for your teacher to have for you. So I highly recommend it. Again, it's Toulouse-Lautrec, The Moulin Rouge and the City of Light by Robert Burlet. So thanks for coming to join me today at Golden Road Arts, and next time we're going to be talking about some other famous artists. So I hope I'll see you soon.